Pieter, would you be opposed to the meeting being recorded?
No, we just have to check with everyone if there's any objection.
Okay, doesn't seem like there are any objections. The meeting is currently being recorded. Anthony wants to know, will this be an open discussion where one can share views? Absolutely. I think the idea is for industry to share their views. Pieter is going to just quickly give us the breakdown on the Department of Labour's view of Annex M and how it should be interpreted. And then we as industry would be able to contribute by giving our views. We would be able to, at the end of the meeting, see if we can define and determine a way forward and what we need to do. If there are changes that need to be made in industry, then the group as a collective can come up with a solution, and we can probably come back to the Department of Labour and propose a way forward, or we can come up with solutions to make whatever is discussed in today's meeting a workable and or practical solution. I don't think there is a predetermined outcome or a predetermined what's the word, point of view. So it's important for all the stakeholders who are in the meeting to be able to share their opinions. And guys, it has to be done in a calm manner. And it has to be done in a way in which we can take the feedback that you are giving and turn it into a constructive discussion. So I don't think it has to be, by no means should it be, what's the word? The comments that are given should be given in the light of the fact that it can be used as a suggestion to find a workable way forward in industry. I think that's more or less where the meeting and the discussion is going. Pieter, controversial Annex M. So Annex M is an informative annex included in SANS 10142 Part 1. It indicates that if you read the table, and I'm trusting that all the attendees in today's meeting is familiar with Annex M. So unless there's a request, I don't think I'm necessarily going to share Annex M. I think everybody's familiar with it. Annex M shows that it is a recommendation that only installation and master electricians should sign off COCs on DC installations. What is the Department of Labour's view on Annex M?
We're not going to give our view on Annex M. I'm just going to say what regulations requires.
Okay.
And give you some background on that. When you look at Annex M, firstly, as you have mentioned, it's an informative document, meaning we cannot enforce that document because it's informative. So in an annex, in a standard that is informative, is a document that we cannot enforce. Now, when you go back to the regulations, and this is a regulatory issue, the regulation doesn't mention direct current anywhere in the regulations. And that is why we will see it as a single phase installation where DC current is used. So there are definitions for electrical tester for single phase, for installation electrician, and for the master installation electrician. That gives you the scope where they may work and may not work. And when you look at the definition of a single phase tester, it says that they may certify installations that is supplied by a single phase. And there we include direct current under that definition. So from our side, we will not be able to enforce to say that direct current installations may only be certified by master installation electrician and installation electrician. We may not enforce it. So any person that is registered with us, critical for single phase, master installation electrician or an installation electrician, may issue a certificate of compliance for a DC installation. Thank you.
Thank you, Pieter. Two things. You mentioned that Annex M addresses a regulatory issue, and you also indicated previously that regulatory issues shouldn't be addressed in standards. What do you suggest we do with Annex M, or is there anything specific that the Department of Labour wants to see as far as changes are concerned within Annex M in the standard? And I'm asking this bearing in mind that we have a lot of attendees in today's meeting that are actually involved in the standards committee. So we would be able to have those changes reflected, or those changes made in the standard. Is there anything in particular in Annex M that that you would like to have changed, or that you would like, where you would like to see changes? Is it going to be removed? Does it need to be amended? What are your views?
Yes, we will discuss it at the SABS committee. I wanted us to discuss it at the earlier stage, but the working document was already at a far stage that they didn't want to discuss any new issues. So I hope with the existing document or working document that we are working on, that this will be discussed at that meeting.
Okay. Tony, thank you very much. I see your hands up.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I tend to agree with Pieter that it should not be in the code. I don't think we can make regulatory requirements, as you said, in the code. But what I think it was trying to do is to emphasize and draw the attention to people what the intention of the introduction of single-phase testers and so on and so forth was concerned. And that goes back many years now. And there was lots of discussion. So I think it may well have been, together with Regulation 6 as well in the regulations, has been detrimental to the industry in as much as that, because anybody can do the work. Once upon a time, if we go back, and I'm not wanting to go back there at all, I just want to draw the attention of the committee to the fact that pre-1993 or 1992, the regulation stated that in order to be an electrical contractor, you had to be registered as a registered person. That's number one. In those days, it was electrical wireman. And besides that, anybody that did installation work, only two people were allowed to do installation work. The one was an artisan, and the other was an apprentice working under the full-time supervision of an artisan. Now that was done away in 1993. And the regulation states that anybody may become an electrical contractor, anybody may do the work, providing he does it under the supervision, not under the supervision, under the general control. The old one was a person had to do the installation under the full-time supervision of an electrical wireman. And I think that encouraged people to employ apprentices. The new thing seems to me to have done exactly the opposite. As I said, anybody can do the work. In the old days, there were many restrictions, and they weren't necessarily right. That I could see completely. But I do think it has had a detrimental consequence to apprenticeships. That's all I want to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Tony. What I'll do is I will come back to Tony's comment. Let's deal with the questions quickly. Melville, are you around?
Yes. I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here with my question, but I know it's regarding people, guys installing solar PV without having the proper qualifications or having installation electricians certification from the Department of DOL. My question is Department of Labour regarding, as we know that it's been changed now from what they call LEG. And if you have a look at the documentation, it still refers to EWC qualifications. So the SPVT qualification has now been approved by the QCTO and people are being trained on it, etc. And if you compare the two qualifications between electrical and some of the qualifications on that list of people that's allowed to access to become a wireman, or to do the exams, etc. The new qualifications is not on that list. So if you look at an electrician qualification and an SPVT qualification, which is a solar photovoltaic qualification, electrician qualification, there's not a lot of DC in there. Where you've got your SPVT, where they are trying to work with DC. So my question is there going to be a revision of the qualifications on that list so that the new qualifications are included, so people with an SPVT qualification can go and also write the exams, etc., and do the unit standards to become an installation electrician?
Melville, yeah, you are jumping the gun a bit. Just for clarity, what does SPVT stand for?
So that is the occupational certificate, solar PV, SPR. So it's solar voltaic service technician. So that's your solar, your residential commercial installer, and also your farm installer. Then you've also got the wind turbine service technician that also works with voltages and high voltages, etc. Yes. So those are the two new qualifications that came out a while ago, but it's not on the list of the Department of Labor for them to apply to get a wireman's license, to become a master electrician.
Can we move this topic to other in the agenda? I think, no, it's good. This is a valid topic. It was one of the things I was going to discuss because all the legacy trades are coming to an end. So it would, as a final section under other, I think it's going to be more appropriate to discuss it in that section. Would it be fine if we move it there?
Oh, it's fine, not a problem. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Melville. Anthony, you've got your hand up.
Okay, so a couple of interesting points that you guys mentioned. So Annexure M, yes, it's informative. Yes, it has no place in the standard. But all Annexure M has been doing since its inception was to explain the regulations. That's all it was doing, of which DOL, ECA, everybody sits on. So that is the interpretation of the committee based on that. And it's been that way for 30 years, plus minus. It's been incorporated plus minus in 93, if I remember. We looked back on it the other day. And it's been the same for 30 years for a reason. And back then, there was a heck of a lot more DC than there is now, because all of your factories operated with DC motors, shunt devices, whatever. You had telecoms using DC. You had, people used to work on Transnet, do their apprenticeships through that. There's a whole bunch of electricians who were specifically trained on DC. They got the same electrician qualification, and the trade test incorporated a portion of DC. You still had theory on DC, you still have everything on DC. Even to this day, you still do the theory regarding DC. Not specific to photovoltaics, but photovoltaics is just another DC add-on. So it was adopted as an explanation back then, which I don't see it can be made irrelevant really, unless you just remove it altogether based on the regulatory issue that a standard can't govern regulation, which is correct. But second to that is, even if you update it, you are bringing in that exact same issue where you're updating an informative annexure to guide industry again using an informative annexure. Now, second to that, now that's point number one. Point number two is, I heard the phrase that single phase is DC, which it is not. DC is not single phase, it's direct current. If you go look at dictionary definitions, you don't even have to. Look at main definitions. I can I'll put some links in the chat to the definitions now. DC has nothing to do with single phase, and single phase mentions explicitly in the definition AC. Even if you look at the word itself, single phase, in which the regulation makes the definition very clear that an ETSP shall only do single phase work, you're only looking at that. So single phase, one electromotive rotation. So there's a definition error as well if it is to be adopted that it is single phase equals DC, in that it goes against basic English. Therefore, you would need additional definitions to justify it.
Excellent. I like that. That's an argument I haven't heard or thought of before. Thanks, Anthony. Are there, so you mentioned the single phase tester, both the DC being covered in with earlier trades, with earlier installation electricians, and I think there with UPSs, you would, especially on commercial installations, you had a lot of batteries connected in series, which resulted in very high 300, 400 volt DC applications. So yeah, fair enough. I've never even thought about that. We'll get Peter's response in a minute. Tony, I see you've got your hand up again.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say that I was chairman of the Industry Training Board probably 40 years ago, and industry decided that because there was so little DC being used, other than in telecom, and I think the railways, that we should remove it from the training requirement for electricians. And that's what happened. And now, of course, it's the whole thing has changed completely. We had COT on that committee as well, of course, and Mr. Hare was the head of the COT training from the electrical point of view. And he was the one that proposed that we should get rid of DC training in the training center, because he said we don't test for it anymore amongst electricians. Only the old guys like myself that did it. So we got rid of it, but it was a mistake. We should never have got rid of it. And it should still be part of the curriculum for training, and I don't believe it is. That's all I want to say at the moment.
Thanks, Tony. I see Mark. Mark, you've got your hand up.
Sure, yes. I think we need to have a structure to the meeting. I think we need to adopt an agenda that indicates what it is that we are going to deal with fully today. Then we will be clear as to what it is that we are covering. Okay. And have a clear definition of the problem statement in relation to each one of the things that we are dealing with, because I don't think that we are here simply to educate ourselves about the codes and the regulations and everything. There must be a problem somewhere that we are seeking to have resolved. Let us deal with that. Have an agenda adopted. A whole lot of us have got other issues that we believe needs to be addressed. Now, they may be addressed today, or we may set up another session. But those are things that are bubbling in the industry. The regulations, the code must work for the industry, So we need to, I think, please let's put a structure to this thing that we can adopt a proper agenda. Can we have? I mean, the best that we are having at the moment, Carel, is effectively some summation of some discussions that you have had with the department and Pieter and other people and your views on something. Yes. That's basically at best what we have got. Let's have an agenda that we are going to deal with today. I think that first up, let's adopt that. Because what meeting are we when we don't have a particular path that we are following? Yes.
Mark, I fully agree. In the meeting invite that was shared, we were going to address 3 points. One was Annex M, the other was IEC 62446 test reports or other test reports, and then the third item was the distribution of COCs and test reports, and then there has to be an item where we can make provision for other, which is where the topic of education comes in. I think what we can do is, out of today's meeting, if once we've maybe raised all the various points, we would always be able to go back and draft another agenda and set up another meeting, because I don't think this is going to be the last. I don't think this is going to be the last meeting of its kind, because it sounds like there are multiple issues and multiple topics that need to be discussed. So I think we can always add additional items, maybe to future agendas and future meetings that we are going to be having. But for today, I think the intention was to have three topics covered. I had quite a lot of feedback from industry on it, so I expected quite a lot of discussion around the pros and cons for either accepting or not accepting single-phase testers. And I think it's important for the Department of Labour to hear those views. Anthony, I see your hands up.
No, 100%. We do need to make sure that we've got everything. But there is also other things that we do need to add. So we do need to formulate it and see either we deal with them now or deal with them later, or we set up separate meetings. But I do think it is a requirement. But other than that, you mentioned all the legacy trades, all of that. Up until, 5-6 years ago, DC was still taught in a lot of the electrician trades. I, for one, went through where you had to go and do your DC motors and everything as part of your training, even though you didn't practically use it much after that because it was phased out. It is, I think it still to this day is part of the syllabus, if I remember correctly. I must just go double check the syllabus. There's one thing I didn't do, apologies. But that would have to be verified. And to get back to the point that Melville added, is to add the new occupational trades to that. Would just mean updating it as an additional trade that is accepted, because it is 80% electrical in any case.
Mark, I'm sorry, you mentioned something about the agenda. Would you like me to quickly put it in Word format and circulate it, or do you want to, were you thinking of adding other points to the discussion?
Yes, there's two critical points that I think needs to be discussed, and unfortunately they are not isolated from what is on the radar right now. Yes. Which is about that, the European standard, the annexure M, and whether a single-phase tester can do a C.o.C. for what you call, or what the person that wrote the agenda called single-phase solar installations. And the reason why I say the person that wrote the agenda calls it that is because we have a different view about whether or not a solar installation can ever be called a single-phase solar installation. But we have got two things that we need there. One is the ever-shrinking scope of an installation electrician. We think that needs to be discussed. And two, to firm up, solar installation is electrical installation work, and therefore any person that does solar installation work must be an electrical contractor, registered in terms of the electrical installation regulations. We also need to have an understanding as to this meeting. I see you are chairing the meeting. Whose meeting is this? Is this a meeting held under the auspices of the Department of Labor?
No.
Or what is it? Is it your meeting and you have invited us to talk? Because really the right forum or the right what you call it, the right coordinator for this meeting needs to be the Department of Employment and Labor, because this discipline is directly under their auspices and authority.
Yes, Mark, thank you very much for that. I fully agree. So to answer your questions quickly, the meeting, I initiated the meeting. And I initiated the meeting because no one else initiated it. It is a meeting that is overdue, and that is overdue for years. And I feel that even though it could have been something that could have been done and managed by the Department of Labor, I feel the Department of Labor has not arranged this meeting, and therefore we took the initiative to arrange the meeting. The meeting agenda was set up by myself based on what I consider to be hot topics in industry, we do a lot of training. We see, we have our views based on discussions I've had with the Department of Labor, and we make our views known to industry. Over the last couple of months, quite a number of articles have been published, and those articles differed from how we train and what we share in our training. This prompted me to try and get industry to just have one cohesive message. And if the cohesive message is that only a specific person is allowed to function in the solar environment, then so be it. We'd be happy with it, and we'd be happy to share it. But what is important is that industry starts sitting around the same table and having these discussions, because they have an impact on the quality of installations. They impact the message that goes out to industry. And if we don't have one message, we end up creating a lot of confusion. And as long as there is a lot of confusion in industry, it allows other players to come into the market and disrupt the market. So if we as industry bodies can have one cohesive message, we can work together in improving the standard instead of sharing opposing views. And I think that's really what it is. So I don't think the intention was to upset anyone or to try, and I didn't, nowhere did I say I wanted to be chairman or that it's my show. It has nothing to do with it. It's important for me, for everybody who's in the meeting, to be able to share their views. And if it means that in a month's time, someone else takes ownership of the forum, and maybe Mark, you can run the next meeting and be in charge of the agenda, and then everybody has an opportunity to do it. But I think it's important as industry bodies to get together and start working together, opposed to each guy just publishing information that opposes what the other body has just said.
Sure. If I can just use that. No, I agree. No, I just thought that the subject is so important, multifaceted, and also is rose-colored by various interest groups, that you would really need a neutral arbiter.
Yes, I understand.
And in the form of the Department of Labor, who are the authority around the discipline and the subject, to basically help us to move along. And I think it's an assignment that they should accept. Although I must say I was a little bit disappointed right at the beginning when you asked for the views from Pieter, and Pieter said he's not going to give you a view, because that view we need. And if that view is not clear from the documents, the people sitting around the table, probably excluding me, but I'm represented in those structures, is that they are the people that wrote all these documents and passed all these standards. I don't think that there is any one standard in this country that does not have a Tony McDonald or a Cecil Lancaster. You are all included and participating in these things. And when I say you are all, I mean the majority. So yeah, I think that the first thing, I think that the department should take ownership of this thing. If there is anything that is being successfully communicated to the department today, is that there seems to be a problem, or there is a problem. And that as the body that has been given the authority to look after the discipline in the industry, they need to step in and ensure that there is harmony and that there is a common understanding. That common understanding, its biggest authority, as the published regulations, the code, and the act. So yeah, I've given you two things that I believe that we need to add to the agenda. And thanks for the ones that you have added in there. I think they're important. But I've given you two more that I think that we need to also deal with quite decisively. And Carel, the big reason why I'm asking this question is what is the weight of the decision or the consensus of this forum? Let's say we agree on a particular point. Let's say we choose to agree that a single phase tester can issue a C.o.C on solar installations. It's a point, of course, that we'll never agree. But let's say we agree. What is the weight of that agreement? What does it mean?
Okay.
Is it not just another opinion? How would that differ with Annex M, which as the opinion seems to be suggesting that it is simply another opinion?
Okay, Mark, thank you very much. Let me answer that quickly. I think in terms of the, and I've noticed the chat coming in. Melville, I'll give you an opportunity. Just give me a second. Let me respond to Mark quickly, and then you can have an opportunity. In terms of today's outcome, if we as an industry are concerned about about the fact that single phase testers are issuing C.o.Cs, but the Department of Labour is currently approving single phase testers to issue C.o.Cs, then the only thing we can do today is to say, we understand how the department sees the regulations, but we as an industry, we understand how the department sees the regulations, we respect it, but we as an industry want to gather information to show the department why this should not be the case. So I think with where we are in industry, we have the ability to stand together, we have the ability to gather information, and we have the ability to inform the Department of Labour on what's happening in industry so that they can apply the corrective measures and so that they can ensure that the regulations suit the local environment. The local trading environment is continuously going through changes. We will always see changes. So something that was meant to be that was implemented to serve a specific purpose 10 years ago, we'll find is currently being applied differently. So we are continuously going to see changes in industry. And the only way that the Department of Labour can effectively act against those things happening in the industry is by having industry bodies providing the feedback and providing the information. So that is more or less how I see it going. Melville. Melville,
thank you for the opportunity.
Yes.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. I just want to refer back. What I've got a bit of a concern. I don't agree with everything, because what we need to understand, a single phase tester, according to the Department of Labour, as there's certain, he's only allowed to sign a single phase. Installation electrician, single phase and 3-phase, for example. But what we need to understand is that these people, their competencies has been verified. So the same with a guy being an electrician, a millwright, etc. A person that is single phase tester, he must have an NQ 3, etc., and so on. So their educational competencies was verified. And on that verification of their competencies, they now allowed now to obviously go and apply to write the exams, etc. Because your standards and the registered person or installation electrician, normal electrician that qualifies, let's say at a college, he's still not a registered person, but he's a qualified electrician. He needs to now go and then obviously go and do the requirements to for example, write the exams, etc., the national exams, and he needs to do the unit standard on C.o.C, etc., for him to obtain to become an installation electrician or registered person. So a single phase tester has proven his competencies, but he's only allowed to do up to single phase. So if we look at a solar PV system, so your normal single phase inverters, etc., there you can sign off. But when it comes to three phase, obviously then it needs to be an installation electrician. And the statement that a PV installation is out and out electrician's job, I do not agree with that, because you've got a DC generator that varies voltages from 100 and something volts up to 1,500 volts. That's a DC generator. And as was confirmed is that in electrician's qualification, there's a smaller amount of DC at the moment that is covered. So that competency, there is a gap there, but what we need to keep in mind is that education can be changed and those requirements can be written in. But I don't think it's fair to say that a single phase tester is not allowed to sign off on a PV system if it is a single phase system, because his competencies has been proven. Here, before he could register, the competencies was proved. So I think it is unfair to say that a single phase tester can't sign off single phase solar PV installations.
Thank you, Melville. Anthony?
You can only judge a qualification by the minimum entry requirements. And unfortunately, single phase tester has a very low entry requirement in that if you read option 3, they would only need 5 years experience to be deemed acceptable. They don't need to have a verifiable trade. They don't need to have any form of formalized training other than an assessment by EWC at the training center. And we've seen it over the years that this experience gets made up. Guys come with phony letters, all sorts of stuff like that to get registered. And that's the biggest worry with the single phase tester, is that there is the 5 years experience loophole. Judging the entire qualification, yes, NQF 3, hey, that's very good. N2 trade test, very good. But remember, there's always option 3. So having competency, yes, training can be adjusted, everything, but we need to start looking at the minimum before we start looking at the maximums. And whatever we say, yes, a single phase tester can do it, remember, it's a blanket for those who have achieved it and those who will achieve it. There's no separation in that. Now, to go as far as just going with Carel, I don't know how many of you guys saw that there was a survey that was run around by the AAs recently, or by industry, a couple of parties. And that's gotten very useful feedback on various topics that we are discussing here today. So I don't know if we can share those topics, or if we can share that feedback at least, so that everybody can see what industry actually feels and what percentage of people actually voted and everything, so that it gives them better than the 20 odd people sitting in this meeting, what actually the electrician on the ground feels, what the solar installer feels, what the homeowner feels. So if you'd like, I can share those results.
Anthony, if you could, that would be great, please. I think that's, I was wondering who was going to bring up the what do we call it, the survey. So if you could share that result, that'd be great. If someone else needs to share it, that'll also be good.
Is there any objection to me sharing them?
No, I think it's important and it's relevant. Let's have a look at the questions. Let's have a look at the responses. Sorry, Koos also mentioned something.
Okay, now Anthony, please share.
Well, do you want to walk us through it, or must I walk us through it?
Leon, can you answer asseblief?
Yes, if I can share the screen, then there we go.
I can do one better. We try and give you control. Have you got it open in front of you, Leon?
Yes, I can see it.
We've got something on the screen. Something is being shared.
Yeah, this is the result. So basically, let me and Leon just run with what's on the screen instead of trying to waste time now.
Thank you.
So the survey was run and it was open to all. Homeowner, solar installer, contractor, unregistered people, registered people, whoever wants to comment. It was shared on Facebook, shared within the ECA. I think it was also shared within the ECB, that they can confirm that. We shared it on all WhatsApp platforms that we could. Facebook platforms, we could everything. So it was initiated between the AIAs and industry, and the information is not there. It's an anonymous poll just to get the feel of industry. So there was 520 odd responses to the whole thing. And the information speaks for itself. So of that, 105 of them were homeowners, and only one of them is none of the above. So that would probably be somebody who's got nothing to do with it. But you've got 79 solar installers who are not qualified who participated, and qualified electricians and contractors, they would have indicated on both. Okay, so first question was, are you registered as a qualified electrician? 79.3%, which is 411 people, indicated yes. So of that, 63 indicated no, which lines up with our numbers. Are you or the company you work for an electrical contractor? 433 said yes, so that shows you that there are some employees who participated in here. Okay, this is the representation of who belongs to what organization. And I expected no and then to be much higher. But it's reflective of where it was shared and everything. It was shared on Facebook, PV, all of that. So we've got a lot of engineers who commented, etc. Most of the comments came in from Gauteng. If you consider 60% of the country's GDP comes from us, it's a statistic I heard this morning. It makes sense. 98% of people indicated that they have electrical knowledge.
But sorry, Anthony, if I can stop you there. Yeah, already starts a problem, because this is where every single person that filled this survey in, they said yes. 98% said yes, and some of them are homeowners.
Yep.
Which is actually quite shocking to see, because that actually tells me that the homeowners are installing their own electrical equipment.
Yes, and one of the facts later is what we'll see as well. But that is a very concerning circle. If you're a qualified electrician with a wireman's license, what license do you hold? It basically shows that a heck of a lot of the MIEs that are active answered. Installation electrician is the abundance. Single phase testers are 10%. And then you've got about 20% of people not registered who answered yeah, which is conducive to our what shall we call it, the blanket, the measure.
Anthony, just before you continue, I see Melvin has his hand up. I just want to find out, before you continue too far into the survey, Melvin, was it something, Melville, sorry, was it something you wanted to ask with relation to the survey?
Yeah, so, you know, as the indication above is, you know, are you qualified, etc. So I would have added a question there that would have said, did you receive any formal or informal training regarding electrical? Remember, a lot of these guys installing inverters, etc., they attend product training for SMA, Victron, etc., etc. So looking at that response, that a large number is not qualified electricians. But again, it comes down to competency. Did they receive any formal or informal training? I would have added that question to then outweigh what is the actual no of people that you would say that's got no electrical background, it's got no training, he just goes and installs PV. Because that would give you a better idea of what is the amount of people that you're dealing with that is not qualified electricians. Thank you.
On the screen is your answer.
Sorry, thanks.
Okay, so I'll get to that one now, but it was one of the questions. If you're a qualified electrician with a wireman's license, what license do you hold? That's fine. Do you do solar PV or DC installations? So 76% of the people who answered the survey do it physically. 23% indicated no. Now that could be a mixture of anything between people who don't believe they can do it, people who aren't competent to do it, etc. So only 76% of the respondees do DC installations. And this comes back to the question that was just raised. Do you have any tertiary education to install PV or DC? This can be in the form of any course, SAPVIA, AREP, ECA, ECB, etc. And 61% said yes. So with that being said, that's already 30% of people from the people who indicated they have electrical knowledge have not done any form of additional competency. Does that answer your question from earlier?
Yes, it does. So if I look at this basic, so let's say what, 37% full.
Yeah. Hello. Is it just mine?
Okay, that's fine, thanks.
Is it just mine?
Sorry,
okay, I think you're clear now.
Yeah, so yeah, now that 51% now includes the people that said that they're qualified electricians. So I would have been interested in seeing out of the first amount of people that doesn't have the qualification, what percentage it makes up. But I mean, it's a good indication. Thank you.
Thank you. That would have just been a further breakdown. Yeah, it's a nice idea. I like it. It's a good idea for future surveys. Do you feel you have sufficient knowledge to install any type of DC components? 85% of people say yes, and 15.6 say no. So the discrepancy of who feels they can install DC components to who feels they can install solar as an industry is relatively different. More people feel confident in installing DC components. This takes it back to factories, telecoms, etc., other than just specific to solar. So there's a whole extra 10, 15% if we verify the two. Okay, this was specific to electrical. Should any person be able to design and install PV and their respective components or DC, i.e. as a DIY or any other person who's done a solar course? So out of all of the responses, 84.4% say no, and 47 say yes. So there's probably half of the homeowners around the miners. And then you've got 34 people who sit on the fence between the two. Should a single-phase tester be able to design, install, and commission any DC components, including solar? 68.1% say no. 131 people said yes, and 25% said yes. Do you believe that a single-phase tester holds enough knowledge able to design, install, and commission a DC installation? 343% say, people said no, so 66% said no. And 131 people said yes, so 25% said yes. Of course, if we ran this thing a lot longer, we would have had a lot more responses, but we were quite crunched for time. Should a single-phase tester be allowed to design, install, and commission a DC installation? Which of the following should be compulsory before they can do so? So we got some interesting results here in that only 16% of people believe, 83 votes, that is conducive with basically what we see happening up here, that they believe outright an electrical tester for single-phase is competent outright to do it. If you add that to 2.7%, makes it about 18, 19%. Okay, but most people indicated the unit standards must cover DC. They must have a trade test. Solar PV course is a requirement, or installation rules as a requirement. Okay, so that's what they all indicated here. DL registration, everything just speaks to being an electrician. If anyone else does an installation and you are called to commission their work, would you? Now, this is one of the concerning ones for the AAs and for most industry bodies, as this means there are between here and probably half of that, you've got 17% of the industry who would go and legitimize other people's work without doing general control. But 54% indicated they would not. And then we've got a whole bunch of fence sitters, 24%. When issuing a C.o.C. for solar PV DC, do you attach more than one test report from the relevant tests? Now this comes up to our second point that we're going to discuss later. 72% indicated they do attach additional information for PV. 10% basically indicated no, they don't, and most said not applicable. That would be conducive to the homeowners, etc. Do you think SANS 10142 and SANS 60364 is sufficient for PV and backup? 44% of people say yes, and 29% say no. Now, this could be the 29% see the two main gaps between the two standards, or because most people don't even know that that standard exists. But that's an argument for a different day. Where you buy your C.o.Cs from? Now, this is also a very important fact in that 16.8% of C.o.Cs are made by themselves. And then between the ECB and the ECA, we hold record of it. This speaks to point, here's the third point on the agenda. You can correct me if I'm wrong. That yes, basically 70-odd%, 75-odd% is controlled by industry bodies, and only 20% odd is made by themselves. Should there be more controls over C.o.Cs, sales and verification of contractors buying C.o.Cs? And there's basically 42% plus 31% saying yes, with only 3.1% and 4.8% disagreeing, and 20% of the population is neutral to the fact. Yeah, then it's, are you satisfied with your wiremans and contractor registration? Please provide comments. A lot of people are neutral, satisfied. There's a lot of comments here specific to this. If need be, we can maybe take this to Department of Labour at a later stage, or I'm very sure Leon and then we'll share the comments with them at a later stage. But it asks a lot of opinions have been shared, which might assist in creating better service. Do you think a third-party organization, such as an SAQCC, non-members organization affiliated, should have a national database for all electricians? 57.6 people agree, with only 17% of people disagree. So there is relative support for a singular body. Would you be willing to provide your information in future to compile a valid database? 75% of people say yes. Now, this is specific to the homeowner. Did you have any solar backup done at your property? Blue is solar. 34% people had solar. 22% people inverter and batteries, and 13.2 generators. Now, this is where the concern starts, specifically what we mentioned earlier. Did you receive a certificate of compliance? 34% say no. 65 say yes. Did you inform your insurance that this installation was done? 53% yes. 46.2% no. Another concern from industry. Are you aware of legal implications of using a non-registered electrician or single-phase tester for the installation? This is a huge concern, because if you take that circle into account in relation to this chart here, that would mean there's about 20% of people who know but they don't care, in the nicest terms. So 86% of people know that they know their legal implications. Do you know what the purpose of an AREP is? 87% of people say yes, 12% of people don't know. So to close that gap, we need education on that fact. Then there's a whole bunch of general comments, of which we can speak to Department of Labour probably at a later stage and just share them with them, so they can see if they want to incorporate them in any way or use them. There's a lot of comments like stop illegal solar installers, supplier should require proof of installation and certification to validate warranties, etc. So there's a lot of good recommendations. Sorry, but that's the survey. Where can I stop?
Can I add something that's not on the survey? I spoke with one of the solar equipment manufacturers yesterday, and they are actually under the impression that solar installation, battery installation, inverter installation does not fall under an electrical installation. I've no idea where they came up with that it's not an electrical installation, but that is a massive concern because they are basically saying that any person can do that type of installation. And I'm sure Anthony might go through other stuff later on where we can see the danger in that. The other statistic that I had was something that was shared to me a while ago, that 92% of installations are not done by qualified electricians, and the 8% that's left are done by qualified electricians, but only 2% of that full amount are completely compliant. And we can also see that with our latest inspections being done basically on a solar installation or backup installation. I haven't had one installation that I didn't have to switch off because it was an immediate danger to the life and property of people. And 95% of those installations were done by people that were not qualified electricians, that either has a green card or a P4 certificate, but they are not qualified electricians. So what we can see is that they don't understand how electricity works or what the dangers of electricity can be. Sorry if I jumped the gun there with people that have their hands up. I just thought that I could throw this in while we were busy with the statistics.
Thanks for throwing it in, Leon. You absolutely jumped the gun, but that's fine. Thanks for the comment. It was interesting. Melville, you've got your hand up again.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Leon. That's actually why I put my hand up. I fully agree with him. But if we have a look at our, like Gauteng, Western Cape, etc. So in the Western Cape, you're not allowed to install PV unless you do an application to the City of Cape Town, where you need to state that there is a qualified electrician and who that person is on the application form. Now, as far as I know, and I might be under correction, it only gets done in the Western Cape. So in the Western Cape, it is regulated who installs and what gets installed as well. Remember, the PV Green Card, as Leon referred to, is an industry association. It's a quality control where industry is involved, and it's got its benefits. So what is being seen maybe in Gauteng is not the case in the Western Cape because it's regulated by the Western Cape government. I don't know what you guys experience in Gauteng or other provinces, but as I said, there's a document that needs to be completed, and then obviously, with that, your test results, where SAPVIA's got a PV Green Card C.o.C, where your test results of the IV curve, etc., of the performance of the PV generator must be included, etc., when it gets signed off. And I would like to hear the comment of what is the process in other provinces, is how is the province regulating the installations of PV installations? Thank you.
Tony,
Leon,
thanks, Melville. Tony, you're up next.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would like to agree with Leon. The number of installations that I looked at, and I'm talking about PV as well as generators, the majority of them, the vast majority of them, have no certificate of compliance have been installed by anybody. Generators in particular, I think the PV is slightly better controlled than generators, but generators are installed by anybody and his friend. And they comply with nothing, absolutely nothing. If we have a look at, in many instances, We have automatic transfer switches, which are not suitable for the industry. On one site, I've had three transfer switches that have failed the very first time the current was restored back to the utility, simply because it has not yet disconnected from the generator before it's connected to the utility. Now you need a switch that's compliant. Not one of these switches are compliant, and unfortunately, the authorities don't seem to want to do anything about it.
Thank you. Thanks, Tony. It's agreed that compliance is an issue, and all the other measures that have been mentioned, from municipal requirements, etc. But we've got to kind of stay focused on the issue at hand here. We are still discussing single-phase testers and installation electricians on DC installations. Leon.
Sorry, Melvin, he mentioned something about the Western Cape and the rest of the provinces. And the stats that I got, excuse me, regarding that was there's about 15 installations a day in the city of Cape Town or within their municipality, and 4 of them a day do not get registered, or they don't even let the municipality know. So we're dealing with the same problems in Western Cape with regards to the installations as the rest of the country. City of Cape Town, they have no idea what they're doing. The inspectors don't know what they're looking for or what they are looking at. And I think that also goes back to the training part. And I don't have a problem with the City of Cape Town enforcing that. I think it's great. I just think there's a gap that needs to be filled.
Thanks, Leon. That certainly is a gap that needs to be filled by industry bodies and by raising awareness with suppliers and installers. Koos, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Carel. Melville, again, from our side, from the ARA side, the information that we've gathered and the inspections that we are doing, you've got from Mpumalanga, as far as Dolstrom, down to Bella, down to the Northern Cape in Kimberley, through Gauteng, through the Free State, up to, we've got up to Western Cape. So we are waiting now for inspections to be done in Durban as well. So I think what we found is not only either in Gauteng or in the Western Cape. What we found is that the stats that Leon is talking about is throughout the whole country. So yeah, I think we need to be very careful in stating certain things.
Guys, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the comment. Do we have any other comments relating to single-phase testers versus installation electricians and Annex M? I would like to move on with this topic, and I'd like to give Pieter a last chance. I don't know whether there are any responses on what's been said so far. Anthony?
I've exhausted probably 2 of my 7 different arguments against the single-phase tester signing it off.
Yeah. Yeah, Anthony, it's good, but if we look at what the survey showed us, the perspective of installation electricians, because the largest responses in your survey was done by installation electricians, and we've had arguments for and against competency. But if we look at the quality of an installation done by an installation electrician, and I'm talking about a solar installation, and we compare that to the quality of an installation done by a single-phase tester, I would suggest that would be something that we need to gather data for, is to be able to have a look at where the core competencies are that are missing, so that we can address that in industry. Sorry for interrupting you there.
Quality is relative to the contractor who has done the job. And as with any form of quality, it will all depend on what experiences you have, what your education was, and everything. It does not stop you from achieving a certain registration. I know many single-phase testers who should be IEs, but they don't have the theoretical backing to back them up to be IEs. Because if I had to ask them to do simple calculations, they wouldn't understand it on that basis.
Yes.
So the IE just has a better technical foothold than the SPT. If I can speak a little bit on the competency side,
yes, please.
The AREP Act is very clear what is competent. The AREP Act makes it very clear that who takes responsibility for competency, and in various forms of regulations, like the construction regulations, all of these various regulations, they put competency into, number one, either in certain regulations as an engineer, but the most common definition is the experience you've gained at that specific task, or the training you've done regarding that specific task. And it puts this responsibility on whoever appoints that person to do that task, to ensure that he is competent. And if you go deep into the AREP Act, that is what the AREP Act says. Now, if I look at the competency of the single-phase tester, there's a glaring difference there, because there's 3 routes to become a single-phase tester. Your best 2 routes is your NQF level 3 electrical engineering and your trade test, option 1 and option 2. But your problem still exists with the 5 years, option 3, where you have somebody who's got no technical training that's coming in. They've received no technical training and they achieve the registration. And I think Cecil said it best here is you have to measure a qualification by its lowest level. I can show you exceptional single-phase testers who put years on some masters. I can show you some masters who aren't worth their cards. But the reality is those are few and far between. If I take the general consensus of IEs versus the general consensus of single-phase testers, IEs just have a much better technical foothold.
Yes.
Now, if you go specifically, if you go look now, forget NXJM, forget everything, and we look at specifically the competency of this person. What is it measured on? The unit standards specific for single-phase are specific to single-phase residential installations. And the 2 unit standards are US 113898 and US 258966. Now, those 2 unit standards is complete a C.o.C. for a single-phase installation, single-phase domestic installation, sorry, that's the complete name, and test and inspect a single-phase domestic installation. If you go read those unit standards, there is one thing that is glaringly concerning about this, which in comprehension of safety, I cannot get my head around. A single-phase tester only has to prove a working knowledge of SANS 10142, where if you go look at the unit standards of an installation electrician, he has to have a statutory understanding of the rules. So he has a statutory understanding, and that you can hold him to account for. The working knowledge is just, it's general understanding, basically. So you're giving authority to somebody who does not have a statutory understanding of the rules and all the regulation. That means they haven't been formally, they've been assessed. Okay, cool, you have a general understanding of the rules, but there's nothing that forces them, the same as an IE, to go and sit down and study sub-regulation 9 of the EIR, sit down and study section 712 of SANS 10142 and learn alternative supplies, learn all of these things. There's nothing that forces them to do that, because they only need a general understanding of the rules and regulations. And when it comes to DC, that is a very, very dangerous risk that we're taking. Because if I take it comparatively, forget everything that we said now, is 230 volts DC is a hell of a lot more dangerous than 230 volts AC. 230 volts DC is a fire starter. So in that is already a problem, where we're already sitting with problems, for example, where somebody won't close a box. In AC, that's not a problem because it only draws a spark. The spark breaks as soon as the sinusoidal wave cuts to 0. But in DC, at 230 volts, you're drawing an arc over an inch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is a risk that you're placing on somebody who's got a general knowledge. And there is a YouTube video that explains this. If you guys want to watch it.
That explains, sorry, what does it explain?
It's the whole 230 volts versus 230 volts AC. I'll post it in the chat.
Yeah, if you can post the link in the chat, that'd be great. Thank you very much. I think you've raised a valid point there. Pieter, do you, or does what can we as industry do to inform the Department of Labor? And if we as a collective industry come up with solutions, would the Department of Labor be open to adopting those? Or what can industry do in order to improve the issues that have just been raised? I'm asking this before I listen to anybody else's views. I still see Tony's hands up and Mark's hands up, but I would like Pieter to just quickly respond to what Anthony has just mentioned. Yeah, Pieter, let me give you the floor.
Okay, thank you. I think clearly what we can see here is that we have to amend our regulations. I mean, we are not going to agree on the reason why we are here. And I mean, if I can give you an example, you have got an electrical installation supplied by a single phase by an electrical supplier. Now the house owner go and get the alternative supply from a solar installation. Is that installation still supplied by a single phase, or is it now a mixed supply? And nowhere in our regulations we discuss these issues. To me, an alternative supply, like your PV installation, is also a point of supply to that installation. So it's possible to have more than one supply to the installation. Where are you going to get an installation electrician? A single phase tester issuing a certificate of compliance for electrical installation that is supplied by a single phase that also incorporates a PV installation. And I take that person to court to say the person was not allowed to issue a certificate of compliance for that house. The magistrate is going to ask me, where does it say in the regulations that he is not allowed to issue a certificate of compliance because that installation is supplied by single phase? So really, I'm going to have a problem. And I do understand the difference between AC and DC. I also have studied electrical engineering, like most of you. There's no way in the regulation we were referring to DC. So, and I think it is time now that we write something in the regulations that we're talking about AC and DC and all other type of alternative supplies, like your diesel generators, petrol generators, wind turbines, because you also get, especially on farms, where people are using wind turbines to generate electricity that is connected to the electrical installation. So that is my view for today, that we are not going to come to an agreement and that we have to start to work on these regulations. And I would like to have proposals from the associations, especially with the recommendations that we can then start with something and that we can go to the advisory council and ask them for the amendment of these regulations. Thank you.
Pieter, thank you very much. Thanks for the comment. Guys, I see the hands. I'm going to get to you shortly. We've got 20 minutes left. In fact, we've got 18 minutes left. So while we're heading towards the end of the session, Pieter, we are definitely going to draw up. And when I say we, I think this forum has to continue addressing other issues in industry. But one thing that I would like to just ask is, and I don't know whether this is a personal matter, but I believe that you are close to the point of retiring. Who would it be that we would be addressing these issues with And is it someone that we would be able to start building a relationship with already? Or is it going to be you up until the point where you retire? Sorry, I don't know whether that was too personal, but it is something that has been mentioned and discussed in industry. So I was just curious.
Yeah. So really, doesn't matter if it's me or somebody else tomorrow. The department have to deal with it. I'm just a peon here in that position. When I'm going to leave, they will replace it. But
Yes.
I mean, that's, yeah, it's nothing to do with retiring. I still have got 7 years to go.
Okay, now I was under the impression it's much faster than that, but 7 years is still long enough to have the ability to affect quite a few changes. I want to, thanks, Pieter. 7 years is way more than enough. I was under the impression it was way less. Thanks. Tony, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say, I know I started my discussion this morning telling you who was allowed to do work and who was not allowed to do work. But I would like to, and I agree with virtually everything that Pieter said, and that is that we live in a new dispensation. That's number one. Secondly, if we look at an engineering company, when I say an engineering company, if we look at a consulting engineer, they can have one engineer in the whole firm and 20 other people that do the work. The only person that accepts the responsibility at the end is the engineer. Now, these regulations, I was very involved with the drafting of these regulations right from 1970, from 1983. And the idea behind these regulations is, why should the electrical contractor or the registered person be any different to an engineer? Why can he not, a registered person, ultimately issues the certificate of compliance, ultimately is meant to carry out general control, and ultimately is going to accept responsibility, and he's going to say, this man is going to work under my general supervision. No different to any other any other profession, not just electrical. Doctors may be slightly different, but if you look at the situation here, if an installation is done incorrectly, don't blame the guy that did the job. Blame the guy who commissioned him to do the job, or not necessarily the guy that commissioned him, but the guy who was meant to carry out, issue the certificate of compliance, and ensure that the installation was safe. No different to any other engineering profession. And that is what this committee endeavored years ago to achieve. We used to have an inspector who came and inspected before we did the job. He inspected before we connected to the supply and everything else. Then we were given the responsibility to do that on our own behalf. And we don't seem to want to be able to do that. Thanks. Does it matter who does the installation if we have supervised them correctly? And I always remember Jacob Malatse telling me that if my granny wants to do the job, I will let her, as long as somebody supervises it.
Thanks, Tony. I think something that struck me out of the survey that Anthony shared was that 50% of the electricians of the installation electricians indicated that they will not sign off a C.o.C. of work that someone else had done. So if you have someone doing an installation and they request an installation electrician to come and sign it off, and that guy says no, he has the ability to sign off an installation and apply or affect his standard on that installation. But the electrician then says no, because he doesn't want to, because he feels it wasn't under his control. And the guy that is looking for the C.o.C. is going to continue phoning around until he finds someone that is prepared to sit in his bakkie and issue a C.o.C. from a remote location without even visiting the site. So I think as industry, we need to become more involved with what's going on the ground. And yeah, thanks for that comment. Mark, your hand.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say that we mustn't blame other people. We are the people that have got this industry, and we are the people that can control it to the best of our ability in terms of the regulation. The regulation says very clearly it shall not be connected to the supply unless it is signed off by a registered person. Yes. Now that registered person must apply the rules that he's been taught.
Yes.
And the rules say, check and see that it complies. Nothing less. Unfortunately, we don't want to do that. We're an irresponsible industry.
Thanks, Tony. Mark?
Sure. Thanks, Carel. I think that there's a number of things that we need to firm up. One is that I don't think that there's anyone that is sitting here with us that does not accept that solar installation is electrical installation. If solar installation is electrical installation, then whoever does the electrical installation must be a registered electrical contractor in terms of the electrical installation regulations.
Yes.
I think we should bury that one. Two, competency requires that if a person is competent in a particular discipline, that person must have been trained and certified as qualified and with the necessary experience to be able to get that work done. Now, if the potential exists, and we have shown that it does, that you can have a person sitting as a single phase tester without the competencies associated with the work that we define it. It's not part of the training, it's not part of anything, then you cannot argue that that person, in all definitions of competency, that person is competent. You can therefore not assign work to a person responsibly that is not competent to do that work. I think that we should underline that one as well. Lastly, in relation to Annexure M, nature does not allow a vacuum. We have had Annexure M that has been put together by industry, accepted by the chief inspector, accepted by the department for over 30 years. It has been there, and it was there for a reason. It is there to close an information gap, and it is also there to give an expansion on the meaning of things. It has guided us forever. It is in place now. It's not a useless piece of information. It has been accepted by all of you as an annexure that is going to be able to guide us as to what is the order of things. We can't chuck it out. If the Annexure M needs to be looked at, let's go and look at Annexure M. But at the moment, Annexure M is what is what rules, because we do not want to open for chaos. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. But I think, so as far as competence is concerned, I think we'll have to get back to the Department of Labour on which criteria should be considered for single-phase testers, or which criteria should be considered for solar installers for that matter. But that criteria would have to be well researched and properly structured. And as far as the informative versus normative annex is concerned, if the Department of Labour cannot stand by the annex because it's informative and it cannot be applied legally, we as industry either need to change it, or we need to have it removed so that it can support both the function that the Department of Labour delivers, as well as what we as industry want to see happening in the sector. I don't know whether you've got another comment on that, but I need to also allow Trevor to...
Safe to say, at some point, we need to have an authoritative conclusion to all these things. But as things stand, we are operating in terms of what documents are in place and are providing information, guidance, rules, and regulations.
That's fine. Trevor, you had your hand up.
So just my view on anybody that tests a installation, I think if we can just consider what I'm about to say now, is if somebody inspects or tests a installation, they usually test the wiring of the house, with exclusion of the loop tests that they go back to the generator or the plant outside. So that's the only test. But when we do PV, we become actually an ESCOM or a city power. because we are building a substation on somebody's roof, and we are adding batteries to that storage. And that is why I think my concern is, you know, if a single phase tester is qualified to test single phase, yes, he can do that, and he can maybe do a loop test back to the DC plant. But I think that should stop there, and then somebody more qualified should test basically the substation on top of the roof, the PV panels and the storage facilities. But yeah, it's just an opinion, maybe to be considered. Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor. I do believe that, so yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at the solar system, and it's valid. And it actually makes the installation much bigger than just signing off a normal solar PV system, because talking about a solar PV system sounds like a very simple and straightforward and almost plug and play device. Whereas if we start looking at an entirely new supply, it puts a whole new spin on the intricacies of a solar PV system, especially when you start looking at backup systems and off-grid systems. I think what we as industry can do is to advise the Department of Labor on certain changes they can implement in order to allow certain people to sign off solar installations. So thank you very much for that. I see we have Rethabile and then Jacob Malatse up next. Rethabile.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Carel. Thanks, Chair. A quick question to the Department of Employment and Labor. I think Peter indicated that there is a need to develop regulations ASAP, but the truth is that there'll be a vacuum. So my question is, what, in his view and from experience, what timeframes are we looking at? And as a department, what do they think we as an industry, different bodies, should do in the absence of this regulation? Because I think we've had varying views. We are not agreeing on anything specific. Maybe we might be in agreement, 90% in agreement for some, but there is no full agreement. So what do we do? Because I do feel that we are likely to get out of the meeting as relatively unclear as when we came in. I'm not sure whether we have moved at all. What is good is that we have aired our views, but as to what happens next is still not clear, and whose role it is to even facilitate. I think at the beginning of the meeting, there was a suggestion by Mark for DEL to coordinate and convene these meetings. What is the agenda what would the agenda going forward be? Would it be for us to now make inputs into the regulation, make inputs into the interim measures that are put? What do we tell our constituency after this meeting? Like, I mean, not that we said we'd be coming to this meeting, but I'm not clear what the stance is, especially from government side. What do they want industry to do whilst they are developing these regulations? Thank you.
Thank you, Tavi. I see Jake is up next. So maybe, Jake, would you like to answer Tavi's question?
Who's the chairperson? Is it yourself?
Morning, Jake. Yes. I didn't really sign up as chairperson, but I'm just managing the meeting, seeing that I set it up. So I don't know whether there's a formal chairperson. I'm just the guy, managing the meeting.
You are a dangerous guy.
No, Jake, no. I have absolutely no controls. I can't throw anyone out.
I thought you'd say I'm the chairperson. You are the chairperson. Because I wanted to start greeting the people, the chairperson and the people. But anyway, you are the chairperson.
Thank you, Jake.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairperson. And thank you all the attendees of the meeting. I just joined the meeting now. And I'm sorry about that because I've been held up and I'm also not very well. But I have overheard some of the discussions that you were caring about. And it is true that leadership should be shown by the regulator. But you should also understand that the chaos that we're in, to some extent, the contribution was from the SAPVIA itself. I don't know whether they are here or not, or the chairperson of the meeting of 0142 is here, but that is one of the problems. And it's not only with 0142. I am sitting with standards that comes from the mechanical side, standards from the lift, standards from the pressure equipment, just because of the decision that was taken by SAPVIA to say they're going to take out all the regulatory aspects that were there. And we were under the impression that that standards, it's controlled by them, and we will not find ourselves in this particular position. But I think at some point I'll have to sit down with Peter to discuss what have been discussed now. Don't expect me to answer the questions that were raised now, because that would be unfair. I've just joined the meeting now. I have to sit down with Peter, get the whole thing, and at some point we'll call a meeting and let's see how we go about. It should be in the near future, because now we've got teams, and then we should be doing that. Remember that we're working with all our stakeholders, but if this issue, because some of the things are messed up by SAPVIA. Remember that we have developed an information brochure, and the information brochure is talking to registered persons. And the other thing is that also the principles of electricity, I hear people talking about single phase and all those things, but also we need to understand in the engineering field, there are certain principles that are set by practices. And I think also we need to be talking to continuous improvement, where we have certain courses that are accredited for professional development. And let's sit around and say which courses are approved and accredited to ensure that people are able to be competent in particular fields. But what is controlling us is the information culture as a regulator. That's what we're sitting about. But I think I need to sit down with Peter and with Tordani. We'll have a few discussions, and then from there we'll have a meeting. We might not sit here with all the people that are here, but we can sit with few people that are leading industry, like the CEO or the MD of ECA, and some few people. We can just elect key people and just have a discussion with the people and provide guidance there. And that would be the slave for me for this meeting. Thank you, Chairperson.
Jack, thank you very much. Do we, if industry as a collective, because I know that a lot of these points that have been raised today have been points that have been going on for years, would we, as industry bodies, if we can come together as a collective and we make certain decisions or we make certain proposals, would the Department of Labour be open to adopting those?
Well, I wouldn't say we'll be open to adopt, but we'll be open to discuss. Remember that industry advises, and the regulator will then look at the pros and cons and chart a way forward. So we will be open for proposals, and we will definitely can discuss proposals.
Thank you, Jack. That is the politically safe way of saying it. Thank you.
No, it's a clever way of saying
it. The Villiers, you are up next. Guys, we are running out of time. I see we are 3 minutes past 12, so kindly, if you could keep it short.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Sorry, I kept quiet for quite a while. Just on the background side, so yes, I was the chair of the PV Green Card Steering Committee when we developed the program. And I think it's, I'm delighted with how we already progressed today, and through Jake's undertaking just now already, that we could really, as a forum, take this further as industry and DOL. And that's where the PV Green Card, and Carel, I think you support where the PV P4 program came from, was to say, at least get some people educated and on board regarding the DC aspects of these systems. And it was never intended, any of these programs, to elevate any person, whether an electrician or not, to more than a registered person. It was merely to get people on board. And it supports actually the type of way that Tony actually mentioned, where we said we'll allow people who are not registered to do the course, but they still need to work under that supervision of that person. And I know recently, and Rethabile didn't mention it earlier, but we paused the PV Green Card program for 3 weeks, within which time the Secretariat in SAPVIA took the time and went through the database and ensured that we've got the guys who are indeed DOL registered companies as the PV Green Card registered guys. So I think we're all aligned, but we need to get the, and it's great that this forum, and I support it and will gladly participate, that we align this to take this further and get everyone on board and safe. I mean, I think it's the safety and compliance is why we are all speaking. So thanks a lot for your efforts. And I just wanted to give that background of the intention of the PV Green Card. And I think, Carel, I also think your P4 was the same idea.
Yes, thanks, De Villiers. Melville, any last thoughts?
Yeah, so if we have a look at electrical C.o.C. training, there's unit standards, for example, inspect and test single-phase domestic installations, etc. So from an educational point of view, developing obviously not a unit standard because now it's called skills programs, but a skills program for the C.o.C. of a PV installation on the DC side. And so electrical person or registered person, by getting that additional skills program or unit standard, if we talk a legacy, getting that extra unit standard will then basically enable him then to do a C.o.C. on and cover those gaps that he might have on his electrical background, to cover those gaps for him to issue a C.o.C., which basically is the PV Green Card at the moment. But then you make it a formal qualification like the unit standards. You know, that's a suggestion. And from an educational point of view, for us to develop it is not a major train smash. That will cover the gaps between the electrician qualification and the SPVT qualification. It's just a suggestion I've got. Thank you.
Peter, thank you, Melville. Peter, would we be able as an industry to come up with new requirements necessary for the Department of Labour to accept solar PV installers? I'm just throwing a wild card into the meeting. I was just wondering whether it would be possible for industry to suggest other registration criteria to the Department of Labour for allowing guys to sign off.
No, that is not what we are saying. You can make proposals,
yes,
that we can discuss, and there's a whole process that we have to go through. Once we have agreed to a proposal, it has to go out for public comment. And then we have to look at all the comments before we can take it to the minister to sign it off. So that is a long process that we have to follow. So no, we cannot just take proposals and say this is now going to be law. We cannot do it that way. Thank you.
Okay, Peter, that's fine. I think that answers the question. So industry is to come back to the Department of Labour with proposals. It's not going to be an overnight process. And I think in short, we don't have a Department of Labour problem. We have a regulation problem. And it's the regulation that needs to be addressed.
Sorry. Can I just make corrections there?
Yes.
We don't have the Department of Labour problem. We also don't have the regulation problem. Remember that these PV electrical installations, they are regulated by the 0142.
Yes.
Yes, and I don't hear you talking about the problems that are coming from that side.
Yeah.
The problem is a spectrum of things that we need to look at. And remember that PV is an alternative. Yes. You've got solar, you've got generators, you've got wind farms, we have got a full gamut of alternatives to ESCOM. And we have been regulating, ESCOM for quite some time. So we should not just say that it's a regulation or the department. No, the problem is bigger than that.
Yes.
Because the 0142 is talking to PV, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so don't say it's a regulation problem. It's a SAPVIA, it's even some stakeholders problems, and it's also the regulations as well that will take a long time. So prepare your proposal, and then we as a department will look at it, and then as Peter says, we'll have to take it step by step until we can make sure that we come with a formidable, because we need to have a solution that is formidable.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we used to have a guy called Tibo Sana that delayed some of the things that we wanted to do, that we needed to do, and that thing was going to be very, very quick in terms of solving those things. But it's water under the bridge. We will be able to see what we can do about this whole thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Jakes. Yeah, we've understanding that you stepped into the meeting late. We've covered a whole lot of ground as far as standards and regulations. We covered information on a survey that has been conducted with industry. We got a whole lot of views from a number of candidates that are in the meeting today. So over the last couple of weeks, I've spoken to a number of guys who have the perception that the Department of Labour is approving single-phase testers, and that is causing all sorts of issues. And we don't, I think it was more in support of the Department of Labour. In other words, Pieter is only doing what Pieter is doing because of what is written into the regulation. And Pieter, what the department does is guided by the regulations and by the standards. So we as an industry have our work cut out for us to make changes to the standards, to support the industry to up the standard of installation, but we can't define, we can't force the Department of Labour to make certain changes that are not reflected and not supported by regulation. I think that's more what it is.
Hello?
Jakes? Yes.
Yes, sir. No, I just wanted to find out, because I think it's the first time I interact with you, or maybe we've interacted and I have.
I'll switch my camera on.
You're from which part of the
industry? Jakes? Yeah, you.
Oh.
Good morning.
There's a problem when somebody disappears for a long time.
No, I haven't disappeared. I've been here all along.
Yeah, but you have my phone number and you don't even phone me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And
that's what we call disappearance.
Tebogo is very strict with how she manages your time.
But she doesn't manage my cell phone. She manages my landline calls.
Okay. Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. Yeah. Jakes, I think as industry, we have to look at what the Department of Labour is doing, and as an industry, we have to support the Department of Labour. And I don't want to really, I want the industry to understand where the department is coming from, and it's good for the department to see where industry is heading and what is happening in industry. So,
but I can, Carel, sorry to interrupt you. I can assure you, after I think I got the gist of what you've said, send those proposals to Pieter. Myself, Pieter, and Todani will sit on the proposals and we'll have a good discussion on them. And then after that, then as I said, we just need a few people. We don't need a whole lot of people, just need a few people. And ECA must be part of those people because they've been in the industry for quite some time. Yes. The leadership of ECA. And then we'll get a few people after we have deliberated, and then we'll begin to chart a way forward.
Jack, thank you.
I think you can sense that a solution is looming somewhere.
Yes, absolutely. Mark, you have your microphone on.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, we will definitely join the process because it is important that there is clarity for everyone. But most importantly, it is important that what we do keeps the end user and the community safe.
Thanks, Mark. Tabi, I think that answers your question. So what we need to walk away from here is probably not the end of a process, but the beginning of a process. And I think what we'll do is we will, I know there are quite a few guys in this forum that have done a lot of work in preparation for this meeting. And I think we'll be able to draw on the information that was gathered, and we will, I will circulate another meeting invite. I'm not sure whether for the next meeting invite, we are going to include the Department of Labour into it. Maybe as an industry, we need to have another meeting and define a way forward, and then make those proposals and send those proposals through to the Department of Labour. Guys, unless there are any final comments, it's past. We are over time, and I think I'm going to have to close the meeting. Thank you everyone for participating and joining this session. I think it's been positive, and a lot of information has been shared. Thank you for your time, and I'm looking forward to future engagements.
Thank you. Thanks, Carel. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thank you, Carl. Well done.
Have fun.
Cheers, Tony.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Cheers, Chris.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.